Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Z, and I am super excited that I get to do this presentation with you today. Obesity research, metabolic health, and your mental state. I'm super passionate about mental health. I can tell you my personal bias is that in most cases, I feel like it is a symptom of something else, a very important symptom, something we need to address. We have to dig deeper and find out what the root cause is. And so this is really going to talk about the connection between uh, being overweight, metabolic health, gut health, and all of those things. So thank you for being here. Super glad you're here. This is my disclaimer. Of course, I make every effort to make sure that I have current, accurate, cutting edge, evidence-based information. This is an educational course, so always make sure you're practicing according to your scope of practice for your local state and local laws and make good clinical decisions. Okay, these are our topics for today: the obesity epidemic, metabolic dysfunction and mental health, gut-brain axis and weight management, emotional eating and mindfulness, lifestyle interventions, and personalized approach. I will give a complex case example at the end, and I've got some surprises for you. Now, I have a lot to cover, and I want the slides to be a resource for you to use in your clinical care. So they're filled with a lot of data. I'm not going to go through and read every single word, keeping in mind the time we have together for today, but I'm going to make sure you know how you can get all of the slides for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to give you the entire slide deck. So don't worry. If we just read a part of a slide or go over it quickly, you're going to get everything. And thanks so much for being here. I love your commitment to learning. I'll do a brief introduction about myself. This is me. Hi. Everyone calls me Dr. Z. And I feel like I have a unique sort of bird's eye view into the functional medicine space. I went from zero. In fact, I'd been very sick in the past. I was declared permanently disabled by Social Security Administration, told I'd never work again, in bed 22 hours a day. I mean, really sick. And that's how I found functional medicine, being able to get my life back, live in the world again. So really value it from a patient perspective, from a practitioner. I took a practice from zero, grew very quickly, and now working in the industry, I do over $1 million in income a month. And I've spent up to 200K on Facebook ads. I trained tens of thousands of entrepreneurs. I've had solo practice, multidisciplinary. I've bought and sold practices. I've been 100% telemedicine, 100% brick and mortar, hybrid. So between what I've done personally and all the practitioners I serve, I feel like I've lived every scenario. I do love to teach. I've taught for many organizations. Um, so that's my passion. Hopefully that comes across today. And I currently live on the Caribbean coast of Mexico, where I run a multiple seven, now tracking for 8 figures business on my laptop and have a blast doing so. So that's the short version of me. Here's a little bit of sort of a timeline. I shared most of the story already, but I had a 7-figure business previously, was doing a book launch, coaching, working with a mentor, loved it. That's when I got sick, didn't know why. Major health crisis, was terrible, wouldn't wish it on anyone. And that's when I found functional medicine. So I was able to recover, launch my practice, had massive growth, saw thousands of patients, was top of my game. Didn't have a mentor at the time, got a little bored. One of the reasons I'll always have a mentor in the future. But I did switch gears, realized my vision was too small, got a mentor, and that really sort of changed everything. I invest quite a bit in my own training. I have a much bigger vision now. I do much bigger numbers, was able to buy a couple homes, all paid off, get my kid through college without debt, live in a beautiful place, and work with an amazing team. So like I said, I've got functional medicine to thank on many levels. And this is my recent offer, the same thing I teach everyone. You can see taking it from zero to over $1 million a month. So those are real numbers. If I can do it, you can do it too. All right, let's talk about the clinical piece of it. The obesity epidemic, this is so, so important. There's so many great things that we do in functional medicine, but this is a really important one because of the huge impact it has on health. So it's a complex problem. It involves food manufacturing, hormone production, genetics, gut health, work demands, addiction. It's not a simple calorie in, calorie out issue. We are in an obesity crisis. And I know this personally. I have obesity on both sides of my family. I've dealt with it on and off through my adult years. So very passionate about it personally and as a practitioner. High percentage of the population is obese. A lot of people are dying each year, and it's just getting worse. Here's some of the consequences. You can see increase in all-cause death, mortality, mental health piece, depression, anxiety. Absolutely. We're going to really dive into that quite a bit more. Lifestyle impact, change in behavior, avoiding social activities, may avoid intimate activities or relationships, lots of self-blame, negative self-talk, really sort of a destruction of self-worth. Here's something I share with patients, and I'm going to show you how to get this because this is sort of like a dense ebook that I created, and I won't have time to go through all of it. So I'm just going to give it to you. And you have my permission that if you want, you can use it with your patients as is. I just think it has such good information and important, but important information to share with everyone. But these are 15 things that will keep you fat or sick. And patients might know about a couple of them, but they don't know about all of them. So I will share how to get access to all of those. All right, let's keep going. Some key distinction we want to make sure that I think is very important as practitioners in this world is that there's no fat shaming. There's many reasons why we're getting fatter. It's not due to a lack of will or poor character. This is not because we need to deal with weight loss and we're in an obesity crisis. It does not mean being mean to others. It does not mean allowing patients to be mean to themselves. Anyone who tries to make a patient feel bad, they're oversimplifying the process. They don't get it. However, no fat shaming doesn't mean being overweight doesn't matter. So yes, the patient is fabulous, worthy, and lovable at any size, but their health, their body, their life works better when they're at a healthy weight. And that healthy weight looks different for each person. So I'll give you some different ways to measure that. So very important you teach your patient these three things. Their patient worth is not tied to their body size. They are healthier at a good weight for their frame, and they deserve to be healthy and feel good. Okay, so let's make sure we go into it with the right mindset. Some new revelations in obesity research the last few years is really looking at it as a chronic disease, okay? And when you look at something as a chronic disease, that means having the same compassion and comprehensive protocols and ongoing care you would any chronic disease, even like diabetes or cancer care, right? Intervention is essential. In fact, it's non-negotiable when it comes to weight loss. You cannot have successful weight loss and lasting results without it. For example, practitioners, patients need to understand the role that hormones, neurotransmitters, microbiome, and genetics play in not only the weight gain, but driving the behavior. And that dysfunction and that cluster of issues is both a cause and a consequence of obesity that creates this endless cycle. And so much of our work in functional medicine is teaching patients how to break that cycle. This is a page I just want to make sure you have as a resource for how to use body shape as a tool. And not something where we would do body shaming, and not something where we would just use pounds on the scale, right? So make sure you look at body shape as a tool, what type of body shape they have, and different ways to measure it and look at their risk for weight. Okay, gut-brain axis and weight management. Let's get into it. So food, weight, and mental health. If anyone thought that wasn't connected, I hope these next few slides give you the information you've been looking for. You've heard that the gut's called the second brain. That's because there's over 100 million neurons in the gut that operate independent of the brain, the ENS, enteric nervous system. They actually developed in utero at the same time and then divided. So it's really interesting as far as coming from same source cells. A huge percentage of serotonin, the feel-good hormone, is made in the gut. And you can read here to see some of the detail. And I'll cover a little bit of the controversy with it, but you need to understand what serotonin does and the impact it has on GI motility and signaling molecules that connect the microbiota gut-brain axis. So it's a very important mediator, and it impacts both the enteric nervous system and the central nervous system via neuroendocrine pathways, metabolic pathways. One example I gave you was akkermansia. You can see it measured on most advanced stool tests, and that will increase serotonin production in the hippocampus. All right, so we're talking about serotonin as a key neurotransmitter. It coordinates GI physiology. It's really fascinating if you read some of the serotonin production and the roles in these signaling hormones. Here you can see 5-HT3 is GI motility only, but look at these other signaling ones in anxiety, signaling dysfunction in the onset of depression, and here's increased expression in patients with depression. So really fascinating that we can see that alterations in EC cells and 5-HT signaling is associated not only with GI disorders, right, like inflammatory bowel disease, IBS, enteric infections, but how it impacts mood. So there's a bi-directional neurohumoral communication system linking the gut and the brain. Remember, bi-directional, super important. Now, some are going to argue, well, serotonin mainly the GI can't cross the blood-brain barrier. It's too simplistic of a thought process. First of all, in some inflammatory and pathological situations, microorganisms can breach the blood-brain barriers. We refer to it as leaky brain. And when you see leaky organisms and membranes in one area, you tend to see it in another. But also remember that humoral neural immune communication between the gut and the brain. Toll-like receptor 2, microbial detectors. So in the GI tract, it detects MAMPs, microbial associated molecular patterns from microorganisms like gram-positive bacteria, candida, viruses, some parasites. And then in the central nervous system, toll-like receptor 2 recognizes DAMPs, damage-associated molecular patterns, primarily as heat shock proteins. And that's from response to stress mostly. And there's this communication in both directions. So in both these scenarios, it will stimulate an immune response and then modify the GI serotonergic system. So it's not limited to the GI tract at all. This will also downregulate the response in the brain and creates this whole pro-inflammatory factors. And viruses can reach the brain via neural pathways, not just the blood-brain barrier. So really fascinating. The research is really validated what we've seen clinically for quite some time. And that can be helpful to share with your patients, right? Obviously, in a way they'd understand. Don't share all those details with them. Just let them know, yes, the gut and the brain talk to one another. If the belly's not doing well, the brain's not doing well. If the brain's not doing well, the belly's not doing well. And in the immune system, right? The immune system is geared to fight infection and disease. And about 70% of our immune system is wrapped inside our gut. Think of GALT, a gut-associated lymphoid tissue. There's a clear connection between digestive problems and allergies, arthritis, autoimmune disease, IBS, acne, chronic fatigue, mood disorders, what we're here for today, autism, dementia, cancer. And so that's why so many people say, start with the gut, heal the gut, right? There's reasons for this. It's not just like a catchphrase. And leaky gut, also known as increased intestinal permeability, will trigger an immune response. Leaky gut might have leaky brain. There's a gut-associated lymphoid tissue I was starting to mention. Think of it as a large immune organ. Here's some of the components of it. Key role in an innate and adaptive immune health. This I started to talk about the development. and also, breast milk and early environment for the baby. And important is the development of the enteric immune system, and that impact on the nervous system, including motility. This was interesting. You can see the article was out here if you want to read it in more detail. But it talks about the disproportionate behavioral impairments linked to immune response. So the gut-brain microbiota axis is a target for therapeutic treatments. You'll see that whether you prescribe or use all supplements, whatever your modality, because it modulates both peripheral and brain immunological function. So you can see here some of the details. Like we talk a lot, even in our lab DX software that analyzes these labs for you. We talk about Citrobacter infection and the impact on anxiety and depression. And this article talked about how this ileal innate lymphoid cell activity can better predict a behavioral response than the limbic brain region if neuroinflammation is present, which is like a crazy statement to be made. Super, super important for those of you that love gut health and love mental health. This, you can see some of the ratio, the signaling ratio, the chemokine production. Bottom line, summarize it. Stress-induced behavioral impairments are seen in patients with gut-brain microbiota axis dysfunction and expressed as depressive and anxiety-like behavior. So that's the sentence you want to take home, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about metabolic dysfunction and mental health. So weight, obesity, and metabolic dysfunction, serious condition. Metabolic syndrome is one of those things that's sort of like stress and diabetes. It's being tossed around enough now, like thyroid issues, that patients all come in hearing about it. But then because they're used to hearing the word, it doesn't carry the impact anymore. But metabolic dysfunction, metabolic syndrome, it's like a huge, huge problem. And sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we have what we call skinny fat. This is, and it goes by many names. You can see some of these other names for metabolic syndrome. And the old definition was just have a couple of these things. But the newer definition is central adiposity always has to be present. So central adiposity has to be present, and then two of those other things. So it's really common condition. Here you can see the issues, and it creates weight loss resistance along with these other metabolic issues. This is pretty much a classic case that will come in to your office as a patient. So be very well versed. Like this is a slide along with the previous one to hang on to. Be very well versed in metabolic syndrome. All right, here's an article that discusses insulin dysfunction. Certainly one of the hormones, I'll show you a few other hormones in a second here, but one of the hormones you want to be mindful about. So what causes insulin dysfunction? Poor lifestyle choices. I think most people are aware of that, but also toxins, environmental burdens, aka endocrine disruptors, a genetic factor, microbiome issues, dysbiosis, high firmicutes, low bacteroidetes ratios. You can see that on your advanced stool test, mitochondrial dysfunction. So more than one issue with insulin dysfunction. So here's some of the hormones you want to be mindful for dealing with weight loss. Estrogen, sort of a pisser because high or low, you can see weight issues. Leptin resistance. I'll show you some good supplements to use, but there's not like a magic bullet for reducing, leptin and dealing with leptin resistance. I mean, the best solution is to lose weight, but the best solution is also the leptin resistance is fighting that, right? It's a challenge. Elevated cortisol, low thyroid hormones, ghrelin, right? So that can be an issue. Here's some of the blood tests you might want to consider. So here's one of the slides that, again, I want you just to have as a resource that you could go back. I gave you a couple of unusual examples here, like the dawn effect, where that could have abnormal early glucose, but it's normal the rest of the day. So then you need to work on liver and specifically adrenal to liver cycling throughout the night. Another example that's sort of odd could be a high normal hemoglobin A1C, but a very low fasting glucose, not quite a match, right? But this is same person, same blood draw. So then you want to ask about sign and symptoms, like are they hangry? Do they wake up in the night? So same thing, they could have issues balancing the blood sugar overnight. So there's some blood tests you can get. Ghrelin typically only measured in clinical research, so you're not going to order that. Here's some what I like to get an advanced sugar panel. So I just want to give you an example of it. Many different labs you can order it from. So I like to see fasting insulin all the time because that can rise years before glucose and hemoglobin A1C will rise. So really like that as a marker. C-peptide is important, specific to pancreas production, adiponectin, leptin. So you can build any sugar panel you like, but that's one of my favorites. I wanted to give you this as a resource from the CDC for testing diabetes, prediabetes, and normal. And here's an example of leptin. So you'll have these for reference for yourself. Some other testing options you might want to consider: adrenal function tests, candida tests, thyroid tests, gut dysbiosis, leaky gut markers. All right, let's look briefly at the thyroid cascade. Very important. I teach this more in detail in other classes, but very important when you look at thyroid that you're not just measuring, a TSH or one other marker, but to really look at the whole cascade and be aware of negative feedback loops. So I won't go through all of that, but very important. And then also be aware of conventional versus functional lab ranges. So, it's not considered hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism until you get outside of this medical range, but you can have a lot of subclinical issues that are outside of an optimal range. But again, look at the whole clinical picture. Look at the whole thyroid cascade and also the symptoms the patient is reporting. Some thyroid notes to consider. Many things can contribute to low cellular T3 hypothyroidism that will not be evident on a blood panel if only TSH is measured. And don't forget obesity and depression. These are some of the things we can see frequently with low thyroid hormone. I did want to give you one slide for some things to consider. Again, always base it on the patient that's in front of you. Use your clinical judgment. But here's some helpful nutrients for production of thyroid hormones. So that will be a resource slide for you. I wanted to give you an example. One of my favorite leaky gut blood tests. There's many different options out there. I personally like to not only see lipopolysaccharides and zonulin, but DAO, diamine oxidase, the enzyme that helps metabolize histamine, and histamine numbers. I want to see, like in this example, if there's histamine intolerance in addition to leaky gut. Here's an example of a Dutch test. This is just one section on the bottom of page 5 of the Dutch test. It's actually a nice test, more comprehensive, but here you can see the patterns for the free cortisol and cortisone throughout the day. Here's someone is quite off range and you can see ramping up at night. They're most likely going to have some sleep issues, and this will have, not only will they feel stressed, they'll might feel like a little bit more tired in the afternoon, but then ramping up, having a hard time sleeping at night. But this will also keep weight around their midsection. This is an example of page 3 of the Dutch test. It doesn't show the whole thing, part of it's cut off, but you can start to see the 3 steps of estrogen, if you will. Estrogen production, what is our source estrogen, phase 1 metabolism of estrogen, the 2, 4, and 16 hydroxy pathways. And in this case, it's not ideal for this patient. We want to be driving the green to hydroxy pathway. Her red 4 hydroxy pathway is too high. And in this case, phase 2 metabolism, and she has a low methylator. Estrogen dominance, this is a term. It's not like a true condition or a disease or anything like that, but it's a description of an imbalance of estrogen to progesterone, or just think of it as a dysfunction of the endocrine systems. Most important thing is to notice not only can you get weight gain, but you can get mood swings. So think of that when you're dealing with your patients with obesity and mental health issues. And by the way, estrogen isn't going to always be high in this situation. Sometimes estrogen can be normal, but the other hormones are so low, it creates the impact of an estrogen dominant situation, or you could even, no, excuse me, sorry, you could even have a normal hormone levels, but phase one or phase two of estrogen is not operating correctly, and that can create an estrogen dominant like situation just from a backlog of clearance. I'll show you some information here. I was just going to say, I recommend you stop saying adrenal fatigue or exhaustion. It's sort of an old term. It's nice for the patient. It makes sense to them, but medically, it's HPA axis dysregulation or maladaptation, just so you know. And why? Why do we care? It's more biologically and physiologically accurate. It eliminates the concept that adrenals can no longer produce cortisol unless you're dealing with Addison's, right? But in most cases, that's not the issue. It also eliminates the idea that this is just an adrenal issue, and it focuses on how the entire HPA axis must be addressed. And here's some of the support that you want to consider. And then I gave you references if you would like to do more reading on that section. Okay, let's hop into emotional eating and mindfulness. All right, these are some general food tips. Again, there's so much more to say and do here, right? But in general, like, I mean, I have like 7 hours where I teach how to do this, right? So this is really like, you know, 90 seconds on it. But having a protein, carb, and a fat with each meal, not snacking, drinking water away from meals, eating 2 times as many veggies as fruit, mix the cooked and raw veggies if tolerable, add a small amount of fermented food. So that's sort of like an ideal plate, short of any GI issues. Avoid refined sweeteners, sugars, and its many forms. Skip the veggie oils, shortenings, margarines, canola, and soybean oils. So if nothing else, this can be good advice that usually works well for most people. Of course, in your practice, you can get a lot of specialty cases. So, I'll use like 30 different meal plans as needed. Sort of going with that ideal picture, here's a whole food pyramid by volume. So volume on the plate. You're welcome to use this slide if it's helpful for you with your patients, but this can help to teach the concept of how much of what should be showing on the plate. So again, this is by volume. Blood sugar balancing. This is a really important concept to teach our patients, and it's absolutely essential if you're dealing with obesity and mental health issues. You're not going to get done what you need to get done without. So make sure they're aware of sort of this crazy, the blue would be ideal, right? That would be normal blood sugar, normal ups and downs. But the red is like the blood sugar roller coaster that most patients are on. So make sure they're aware of that and you explain that well. All right. Some of these like more details, that's going to be in the handouts that I give you. So don't worry. I have tons of resources for you. I know it's a lot of content and I like to dive deep into it, but I'm also going to give you content that you can use with patients. So sort of a more simple lay explanation for them. But this is my weight loss flow chart and educating patients. Like this is the path. It's not just calories in and calories out. So this starting top to bottom is what I recommend for the best results. So number one is kicking the sugar addiction. Without kicking that sugar addiction, hard to do anything else. And in some of the handouts, I talk a bit more about how to do it, but it's not enough just to tell people not to eat sugar. You have to deal with the hormone imbalance. You have to deal with if there's like a candida overgrowth or some organism that's driving behavior, right? So you have to support physiologically also. Okay, so kick the sugar addiction, then balance the blood sugar level, address any digestive issues. Now you're working on weight, like all this is leading up to it. You're going to refine the diet. Now you can start getting moving. You can do some body shaping. If you start the moving a little bit too early, sometimes that increases the hunger drive too much. And some research has shown that that will undermine weight loss in women. Excuse me, sorry. Address adrenals, stress, and hormones, lifestyle cleanup, non-toxic changes, and address any hidden issues such as viruses and etc. So again, really complete, but where do we start and how do we educate patients to move through it? Here's some nutritional supplementation and herbs. So if you have a favorite supplement line that you like, you can look up some of these ingredients and see they might have it in a blend, they might have it as single supplements, but I wanted to give you some of these as a list. Some are more well known, some like you might not have thought about using GABA to support weight loss and mood, but it works really well. 7-keto, this enzyme here. So those are some good options, hopefully, on the natural side to help you out. All right, lifestyle interventions and personalized approaches. So let's just take a little look at that here. This is something I made, gosh, so many years ago, but I used it with just thousands of patients. And this was to help them prioritize these lifestyle changes, to not like start with biological dental. Maybe it needs to happen, it's super important, but start at the middle. So this is like a little solar system diagram. Start at the middle, feed your soul. That's a meal plan that I created, very similar to that slide that I showed you, but one that most people could use and easy to modify, easy to take to restaurants. And then you want to work on, toxins and water, increasing proteins and fats, decreasing high glycemic carbohydrates, decreasing toxins, and then maybe some detoxification is needed, improving sleep, working on adrenals, meditation. So you just sort of start in the middle and move your way out. So I hope that's helpful for you. I did want to discuss one complex case that was very interesting to work with. I mean, such a high percentage of patients over the years had obesity issues and mental health issues. So it was super, super common. This particular patient came in, lifetime of obesity struggles. She had 2 official diagnoses for autoimmune conditions. She had a handful of hardcore medications, very severe constipation, insomnia, migraines, depression, and anxiety that was debilitating, hair loss, not much bloating, but no libido, acid reflux, floating stools, snoring, and what she and her family described as seizure events. Testing revealed candida overgrowth. She was positive for methane dominant SIBO. Not surprising considering you see that quite a bit with constipation, obesity, and depression. So quite common. I put her on a strict anti-candida diet. We removed gluten and dairy free. We had additional testing that showed an immune response to gluten and severely depleted secretory immunoglobulin A, SIG-A, high calprotectin, lots of inflammation. So we also had strict meal timing of 4 hours between meals. She was on more supplementation than most. This wasn't all at once, but over the course of working together, we used digestive aids, antifungals, anti-inflammatory. We put in immunoglobulins, SBIs, gut lining support, mood support, antimicrobials, used biophages, biofilm busters, binders at times, probiotics, had to do drainage support. Oh, excuse me. Use a prokinetic and then do a detox. So pretty much just about everything, right? But the results were phenomenal. She couldn't have been more thrilled. She lost 53 pounds. She hadn't been that in since she was a teen. She was in her like early mid 40s at the time. She did use LDN, and it was just absolutely life transforming for her. So don't be afraid to work with these patients. Don't be afraid to get real with them about obesity and the connection to mental health, because you make a difference for one patient. It's not ever just that one patient. If they have kids, it impacts their kids. If they work, it impacts how they show up at their job and their work relationships and their productivity. They're in a relationship, there's a ripple effect outwards. So the obesity crisis is absolutely huge in our country. It's a lot. It can feel very daunting, but one person at a time, go in there and start tackling it. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I do have resources for you. So just go to the registration page, wherever they have their landing pages where they have resources. And I put 3 things in for you that I think are really important. One is the 15 Darn Things Keeping You Fat or Sick ebook. I want you to have it for yourself, but also you're welcome to use that with patients if you find it helpful. It's something I used just for many, many years with my patients. I'm going to give you this full slide deck because some of these slides I went over very quickly, and there's a lot of good resource information and references. I want you to have access to all of it. And then I'm going to do a live Q&A. I really like Q&A is my favorite part. So make sure you check it out. You have a unique special invitation to join me there. And I'm going to be talking about how to actually put this clinical piece in with practice growth. So how do you make your practice very profitable while having big patient impact? And then you're welcome to just bring any question you want. So, all right, I hope you enjoyed it, and go out there and get them and serve them. And thanks for your commitment to ongoing education. All right, bye.